Okay, so this is a video for parents and students also can look at this to remind them what the different repetitions in Cornell notes are that we do and why we do them. So just to start off, Cornell notes are a research-based type of note taking, and it's based on this rate of forgetting curve. And so if you don't ever look at your notes, you take the notes, but then you never look at them, then your chances of passing that test are slim to none. But if you go back and do at least one repetition, then that ups your chances to maybe like a 50%. Still enough, but it ups it from maybe what it might have been like around the 30s or 20s if you never looked at your notes again. And then for every repetition that you do, you raise your chances of earning a higher score on your assessments or chapter tests. And so research says that if you do at least 4 repetitions with the notes, then you will earn an 80% or higher because you've retained more of that knowledge. And so Cornell Notes is just a way to help them do that, get those 4 repetitions in. And so this is what your students' notes should look like right after they take notes. And so they're just encouraged to set it up. You have your 2.5-inch margin here. And then this is your notes side. And so they put the topic, which is usually in my class the section that we're covering. They have to put the date that we took those notes. They have to put the essential question, and the essential question is 1 or 2 big ideas that they need to learn from that day of notes. And so by the end of notes, they should be able to answer these essential questions each day. And then right next to it, I put the summary at the beginning next to the essential question, because the summary is no longer just, oh, today we learned, and then you list off a bunch of things that we learned that day. It's more specific, and your summary is always going to answer the essential question or essential questions for the day if there's more than one. So that's why these are side by side. And then they'll take their notes. They don't really write in this column very often while we're actually taking notes. They'll just put the main ideas or study questions that they're going to write, or the examples that we go over that day. Otherwise, they're not putting any of the notes per se in there. The notes will go over here, so that'll be vocabulary terms, or when we work out the problems, the examples that we do that day, those will go over here in the notes column. And so that's just your basic format, okay? But they're just to take notes. They're not supposed to do any highlighting or circling or anything as they're taking notes, because them doing that is kind of their first opening to those notes. Then right after we're done taking notes, I teach them that they should do 1 repetition, and typically the easiest repetition is the highlighting of main ideas and circling key terms. Research says that within the first 10 minutes of learning something, you should interact with your notes or do some sort of repetition, and so this is the easiest one to do. And so we only had 1 main idea, so then they would highlight vocabulary, and then they would have to go back and scan their notes. So that's kind of their repetition. And so I always tell them too, as you circle something, say the definition to yourself. So then they would say, okay, conjecture, that was a key term, so I'm going to circle that. And then reread what it meant. So conjecture is an unproven statement based on observations. The next key term was inductive reasoning. So they should circle that. And then read to themselves or say it out loud what inductive reasoning was. So when you make a conjecture based on observations, or you're looking for a pattern. And so then that is what they are to do for the circling of key terms. We say we want you to do something different. We don't want them to highlight, because what students do is they end up highlighting a ton of stuff. So then it just ends up being most of their notes are all highlighted. And so we've kind of limited them to doing the main ideas only as a highlight, and then circling the key words in a different color than what they took notes in. And sometimes students like to circle the examples too, which they can do that, but I don't tell them they have to. Really, I just want those key terms that we talked about. And again, it should be in a different color so that when they're scanning their notes, they can figure out where were the vocabulary terms or any theorems or postulates that we talked about that day. So then that's the first repetition. Okay, and they should do that right after they're done learning it and taking the notes. They go back and do that. And so now they've just upped their chances of doing better on the test. Okay, All right, then what they're supposed to do at home is if they didn't finish their assignment in class, then it's homework and they need to finish it. It's due the next day. And part of their homework is to now go back, reread the essential question, and write your summary. So this is another repetition. So then research also says within the first 24 hours of learning something, then you should interact with the notes again. Okay, and so if they do this as homework every night, they go back and do the summary for the section that we covered that day, that's getting that second repetition in because they've already done this. So that gets in the second repetition, so it helps them retain more knowledge. It's a repetition because they have to read this and then they have to scan through their notes to see where did we answer that, or where get the information so that you have enough to be able to answer it with. Okay, so how to use inductive reasoning to write a conjecture. So then a possible summary that they could write, again, it's not today we learned and then listing off everything that you learned. You're just answering this question, being very focused. And where I get these essential questions from is these are the types of questions that they're going to have on the test. It may not be in this form, but they have to be able to answer this in maybe an example or a problem that I give them. So how do you use inductive reasoning to write a conjecture? So they would write something like, we look down here at conjecture. It was an unproven statement based on observations. Inductive reasoning, it's when you make a conjecture based on observations. We're looking for a pattern. So they may say something like, we use inductive reasoning when we look for a pattern. And then make a conjecture based on that. Okay, so that is their second repetition where it's very focused on whatever that essential question was for that day. Okay, so that's their second repetition. They should do that within the 24 hours of learning it, and so that's why I make it part of their homework. Okay. All right, then at some other time before the test, and they say within the next 7 days, but really it's just make sure you get it in before the test, is they have to write study questions in this margin. So this is in this little left-hand column margin here, or left-hand column, is where their study questions go. Okay, and so basically they have to write at least 3 questions that reflect the information that is here in their notes. Okay, and we have different levels. We have a level 1, a level 2, and a level 3 question. Sorry, it's the announcements going on. And so, for instance, I could say something like, what is a conjecture? That is a good study question that reflects something that's over here in the notes. And that's what we call a level 1 question, because the answer, it's an easy, oh, there's the answer right there. Okay. Or they could say, what is inductive reasoning? Okay, that can be another level 2 question. So those are all level 1s. And a lot of times I tell them they should number these, and I'll tell you why here in a second. And then my third question, I'm going to try and do maybe a level 2 question. And so maybe I'm going to bring it in as this conjecture and inductive reasoning. So a lot of times your level 2 question is tell me how these 2 things are different, tell me how these 2 things are the same, or tell me how these things relate, that kind of thing. And so I'm going to say, how does a conjecture relate with inductive reasoning? So how does a conjecture relate to inductive reasoning? Okay, so then that is a level 2 question. So I'll put a 2 here, because that is not just, they're not just rattling off, here's the definition for conjecture, here's the definition for inductive reasoning. They have to go a step further. They're going to read those definitions, and then they have to tell how do they relate to each other. So then my hope is that they look, oh, conjecture is an unproven statement based on observations. Inductive reasoning, when you make a conjecture based on observations. And so that is, you can kind of make that connection as to how they relate. So that is their third repetition that they're going to do with their notes, is another time, and they shouldn't do it the same time that they do their summary. Again, they should step away from their notes and then come back and then do something with it. So then writing those 3 questions might be something they may do the next day. Not the same day that they learned it, but the day after they learned it. Again, just so that they're going back and redoing it. If they would have done the summary and the writing of the questions and the circling and highlighting all at the same time, that only counts as 1 repetition because you're dealing with the same notes all at the same time. And so even though when I grade it, I don't know when they did it, but they're cheating themselves out of those repetitions because they're doing it all at once, so that only counts as 1 repetition. So then their retention level is going to lower. It wouldn't count towards those 4 repetitions of earning an 80% or higher. And so that's why it's encouraged that they shouldn't do any of the repetitions while they are taking notes, or shouldn't do like 2 repetitions at the same time, because then again, it discounts that. And then the last thing is then again, they step away from their notes, and then some other time before the test, so in the days leading up to the test, then they go back, reread their questions, so cover this up, reread their questions and see if they can answer them. So then this is a way that you can help your student, is that you can cover up this side, or you can just hold their notes and ask them the study questions over here and then see if they can answer them, and all of the answers are over here for you. So even though you may not have had geometry in a really long time, which is okay, totally fine, I get it, because you don't typically use it every single day. But this is a way for you to be able to help them. And so you can ask them the essential question, and then they should have written the summary already, and so then you can see if they get this correct. Okay, or you can ask them these study questions and the answers are over here, so you can see if they're getting them correct. So that's one way that you can help them study. Okay, but then what their last repetition is they're going to go back, read their questions and see if they can answer them. And then that level 2 question that they wrote, they have to write the answer to that over here in the notes somewhere. Okay, so then the reason why I numbered these is so that I know that number 3 question here is the one that I'm going to answer, because that's my level 2 question. And then they have to write here the answer to this. And so it's just kind of what we were saying. I would write something like, inductive reasoning is when you make a conjecture, and that conjecture is the unproven statement based on observation. So that's how those 2 tie in, and I would write that in. So that would be their last repetition. Again, they would do that at some point before the test for each of their sections. What I grade every single day is I look at their book work, and if it's complete, they get 5 points. And then I look to see if they did the highlighting part and the summary part. Those together are worth 5 points. So that's the 10 points that's in the grade book. The question writing and then the answering of their level 2 questions, that is something that I will check the day of the test. I'll collect their binders and open up to one of the days in their notes. I don't tell them which one, so they have to do all 4 repetitions for all sections of their notes. And then I'll grade if they did all 4 repetitions on that day of notes. So that's on test day. Okay. So I just want to give you a little information about what your students' notes should be looking like. So if they're not doing very well on quizzes, or they're not doing very well on tests, question them about whether or not they're actually doing the repetitions the way that they're meant to be done, and that they're doing all 4 repetitions, and they're doing them at different times. Because like I said, if they do them all together or a couple of them together, then it's really only counting as 1 repetition for the ones that they're doing, even if they're doing 2 of the repetitions at the same time. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you.